Hello, I'm Dr. Dwayne Alexander Miller. I lived for 7 years in the Middle East, 2 years in Jordan, 2 years in an Arab city in Israel, Palestine. And I just wanted to share with you some of my own insights about ministry with Arab Christians. I've got 7 points, though I'm probably going to be able to expand and add some more later on. I look forward to hearing any questions or comments that you have. The first thing that I wanted to say is to learn about their culture and their history. There are some great books. For example, Kenneth Cragg wrote a book called The Arab Christian. Kenneth Cragg was the Anglican bishop in Jerusalem for a number of years, and he was a very astute and observant scholar of cultures, and he also wrote about Muslim-Christian relations. Anyway, that book is a little bit old, but it still will give you a great foundation. If you're working with evangelicals, I co-authored a book called Arab Evangelicals in Israel. And if you're working in Israel, Palestine, or even in Jordan, that is a really good book to pick up. And that is pretty recent. And you can get that on Amazon. Arab Evangelicals in Israel. Dwayne Miller, Phil Sumter, Azar Ajaj are the authors. So learn something about their historical context, even if it's just going to Wikipedia and reading the country page. And then also don't just read the country page, read the page that's called Religion in ... Religion in Lebanon, religion in Tunisia, religion in Egypt, or wherever you're going to be working. Another thing that I want to say is that the word Arab can be a little bit contested, a little bit difficult. There are a lot of Christians who speak Arabic, but who don't ethnically identify as Arabs. This is especially true if you're in Lebanon or in Syria, but also especially in Egypt. Just because people speak Arabic doesn't mean that they are Arabs, in the same way that just because you speak English doesn't mean that you are English. So be sensitive about these things. Here in Madrid, we have an Arabic speaking fellowship, and we call it Arabic speaking. We don't say it is Arab, because we have people from North Africa who are Christians who speak Arabic, many of them converts from Islam. However, their ethnicity is not Arab. So that's like point one, point B. Two, and this is especially for Americans. If you're not from America, you can kind of skip this one. But I've got to say, as a fellow American, you need to know that Americans have the bad reputation all over the world of being people who don't know anything about history. We have the reputation all over the world of being people who don't know anything about history. And if you look at the context and the history of the United States, it kind of makes sense. It's a really, really new country. I mean, I'm here in Spain, for example, and my kids are taking Spanish history, and they go all the way back to, the Bronze Age and stuff like that. Because there has been humanity and population here since that time, and there's a lot of history, including the recently famous, again, Roman Empire, which was here in Hispania. That was the name of the Roman colony, Hispania. So just be aware of that, and try to not fit into that stereotype. Try to not be the person who doesn't know any history at all. I remember speaking with a young guy. He said, I want to go to Turkey and I want to share the gospel with the Turks. And I'm like, that's great. I said, you should read, here's a good book about the Ottoman Empire. And he said, I'm not really interested in history. I just want to share the gospel. Okay. On the one hand, I kind of appreciate that. It's good to just want to share the gospel. But if you really want to connect with people, you have to know something about the background of who they are and where they come from. And the Ottoman Empire, especially for Turks, is extremely important. It's also important for Jordan, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. That was all part of the Ottoman Empire. Anyway. Another thing is, be aware that the way that Arab Christians and Arab Muslims use language can be different. So a good example of this is Assalamu alaikum. This is an Islamic greeting. Historically, this was a greeting that a Muslim could give to fellow Muslims, and they could not give it to Jews or Christians, because to say Assalamu alaikum does mean I'm not going to threaten you. Now, a lot of people today, including Muslims and Christians, don't know this, but I have almost never heard Arab Christians greet each other with Assalamu alaikum. The one time I used that in a sermon, I said, Assalamu alaikum bismillah wal ibn wa ruh al qudus. And people loved it. It's peace be with you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So that was really a way of kind of owning the Assalamu alaikum. But that is an Islamic greeting. I'm not saying never use it. And, you know, Arab Christians, they're very nice, honorable people for the most part. And if you say Assalamu alaikum, it's kind of like, you know, you're from Georgia and someone from another part of the world goes over and says, oh, you Yankees. And you're like, okay, that's American history. Yankees, totally different part of the country, different time period. But, you know, you're probably not going to be like, oh, we're not Yankees. You know, we're Dixie. You know, you're probably not going to do that. You're probably not going to be a jerk. Okay. Yeah. But, you know, just be aware that the way that words are used is different. Probably the best example of this, even better than Assalamu alaikum, is Yeshua. I mean, don't please around an Arab Christian. I mean, unless they're a convert from Islam and they're working only with converts from Islam, that's an exception, but that's really rare. Don't call Jesus Isa. That's the name of Jesus in the Quran. That's the name of the Islamic figure of Jesus, who is a very different person than Jesus that we find in the New Testament. His name is Yeshua. Which is really close to Yeshua, because Yeshua comes from Aramaic, and Yeshua is just the Hebrew. The Sha became the Sa, which also happens with Arabic, Shalom, Salam, Manishma, Madanasma. Anyway, we don't have to get into the grammar, but yeah, just don't do Isa. Don't go there. Don't say that. Please, ever. Again, your Arab Christian friend will probably not say anything, but they will be embarrassed in their heart, but they will try to preserve your dignity because they are honorable people. But yeah, just don't even go there. Time is different. In America, punctuality is valued very much. And if you say we're going to take 30 minutes for our meeting and then everyone can leave, we kind of expect that to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then people are upset and they're offended and they've, you know, their time has been misused. And that within that Occidental cultural framework, it does make sense, but you just have to get beyond that when you're going to work in the Arab world. And this is true for Christians and Muslims. It's even true for some Jews, especially the Sephardi Jews, who are much more Semitic than the Ashkenazi Jews, who are much more kind of Germanic and European, Central, Northern European, I should say. So time is different. The event is the event. Don't assume that things are going to be efficient and move along quickly. The point is that all people are together. It's a special thing that all the people are together, and you don't need to make it go faster. And if you have other things to do, and well, first of all, as an American, you're going to learn to schedule for this. You're going to learn to schedule that an hour-long meeting may well take longer than an hour. But just be aware that the way that people function and work with time is different. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. Another thing that I would like to say is that what works in your country does not necessarily work in their country. So as Americans, and this is not just for Americans, I've seen like South Koreans do this too. For example, I met a South Korean pastor. He'd been very successful in planting a really large church in South Korea. And he said, well, God has called me to the Muslim world. So he went to a large Muslim majority city in the Middle East, in the Arab world. And he tried to use that pattern that had been very successful in South Korea over there in this large capital city in the Middle East. And guess what? It did not work. So as Americans, we often tend to think like, okay, well, we figured out how to solve this problem. We like solutions. This is a cultural strength, but it's also a cultural weakness, because what works in one place doesn't always work in the other place. I mean, I don't want to be political about this, but look at the great quest to bring democracy to Iraq. I mean, has that really worked? This was a culture that had never had any history of democracy. But we say, hey, it works here in America. We're just going to take it over there, and they're going to do it. And they'll have a constitution, they'll have elections and ABC. It's the same recipe. It's going to work. Well, I mean, obviously it didn't work out. And again, I'm not trying to be partisan or political about this, but that's just one example of how what works in one place may not work in another place. So really spend time to listen to your Arab Christian colleagues about what works and what doesn't work. And if you have something that worked where you're from, say, hey, this worked where I'm from. What do you think about this? Is there a way that this could work here? And there's a good chance that the answer would be like, yeah, something like that could work. We'd have to make these modifications, these changes. Okay, well, that's okay, taking an idea and then modifying it, adapting it, nothing wrong with that. But again, this is point 5. What works in your hometown, there's a good chance that it's not going to work in the Middle East, at least not without adaptation. 6, money and accountability. This is always a really sensitive topic. So American ministries and European ministries as well, we have high expectations of accountability. In much of the Arab world, and this is true for Muslims and Christians as well, you normally have what's called a patronage system of economy and exchange. I'm not going to go way into that, but the point is that the way that money is handled is quite different. So when you say, okay, if you get into a partnership with an Arab ministry or an Arab minister or from the Arab world, and you need accountability and receipts and stuff like that, you have to explain. First of all, and this is the most important thing, say, this is not because I don't trust you, okay? This is not because I don't trust you. This is not because I don't honor you. Explain that this is the same thing that you would expect if you were sponsoring a church planting team in Missoula, Montana, or Buenos Aires, Argentina, or Kampala, or Cape Green, or Madrid, Spain. What the point is, this accountability is part of the culture that is built into it, and it's not something that you're just applying to that particular person or ministry. That's important. And they'll understand it, but you have to explain it. And the other thing you have to say is, in the same way that I'm asking you to be accountable and to be able to give me receipts for different funds and different expenses, I have to do this too. You probably have somebody above you. Even if you're the senior pastor of a church, there's probably a board of elders or an accountant who can say, hey, how is this money spent? I need some verification. You have $3,000 in travel expenses. I need to know where that went to. And then you would have the obligation of giving receipts and showing hotel, travel, food. I lost my luggage and I had to buy a bunch of, new clothing or something like that, which the airplane company should pay for, by the way, but they don't always do it. So explain all of that. And that helps to have a relationship that is honorable and that is respectful. And just let them know that you're asking them to play by the same rules that you play by. That is part of your culture, and it's not because you don't trust them or because you think that they're in any way dishonorable or not as good as you are. And the final thing is the relation between men and women. So this is very nuanced. So you're really going to have to kind of read the room and understand your local context. This is going to be different from country to country and even city to city. It might be different from denomination to denomination. But the way that Arab Muslims handle gender relations and the way that most Arab Christians handle gender relations is different. So, for example, you're not going to find an Arab Christian woman, I don't think, from any denomination in any country, who will not shake your hand. If she doesn't want to shake your hand in public, it's not you. It's just the context, and she doesn't want to make problems with the people around her. And a lot of Arab Christians, not all of them, but a lot of Arab Christians have incorporated a lot of European customs. So if you've been to Europe, then that would give you an example. So for example, many of the Christians in one of the cities that I lived in, the men and the women would greet each other by kissing each other on the cheek. Now, it's not a physical kiss. It's more like, your lips almost never touch anything. I mean, but it's still a sign of respect. And the men and the women will do that with each other. Now, unless you're talking with a very secular Europeanized Arabic Muslim family, that's That's going to be very rare. Can it happen? Yeah, it can happen, but it's very rare. Are you going to meet maybe some very traditional Arab Christian families that don't do that? Possibly, possibly. But just remember, gender relations are different. And it really makes sense. The fundamental teachings of Islam about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman are profoundly different than the teachings in Christianity about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. Same thing in terms of marriage, same thing in terms of having children, and same thing in terms of other related questions like inheritance and divorce. All of these are profoundly different in Arab Christianity than in Islam. So anyway, those are just a couple of basic points that I have for you in terms of what are some things that you should take into account and that you should think about as you are dealing with Arab Christians, as you are forming a partnership and working along with Arab Christians, whether it's a particular person or a family or a whole ministry or even a whole denomination. Please leave your questions below. I will answer them as best as I can. And I'm sure that I'm going to think about a lot of stuff after this. So I might have another video coming up. God bless you. And thank you. Thank you for partnering with Arab Christians in the Middle East and beyond.